Shalom, my dear brethren in Yahshua Messiah. I am Kirui Andrew from Kenya, East Africa. Allow me to cross-examine Professor R.L. Solberg on the issue of kosher food. Part 2. Now, specific objectives of this cross-examination is it true that Gentiles have never been expected to keep kosher food laws, as claimed by Professor? Now, so to start with, let's listen to what Professor has to say.
A major tenet of Torahism, which you may know as the Hebrew Roots Movement or Torah-observant Christianity, is that the kosher food laws are required of all followers of Jesus today. Our Torah-keeping friends not only believe that Christians are required to abstain from all the foods prohibited in the law of Moses, but also that eating things like pork and shellfish is sinful and lawless. And I'm going to share with you today yet another reason why this just isn't a biblical position. And we're going to look at a common passage from a new perspective. As we've talked about in other videos, Gentiles have never been expected to keep the kosher food laws. The Torah shows us in no uncertain terms that under the law of Moses, God had a different dietary standard for the Israelites than he did for the Gentiles. For example, in Deuteronomy 14:21, Yahweh commanded Israel, "You shall not eat anything that has died naturally. You may give it to the sojourner who is within your towns, that he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God." So the Israelites weren't allowed to eat anything that died naturally, not even meats like beef and lamb, which were allowed under the Mosaic law. The Israelites weren't allowed to eat it because it wasn't ritually killed, and it was therefore considered unclean. However, they were free to give or sell that animal to the Gentiles, the sojourners and the foreigners, who could eat it. So the Gentiles were allowed to eat food that was considered unclean for the Israelites. And why this distinction? Verse 21 tells us, "For you, Israel, are a people holy to the Lord your God." The word holy in Hebrew is kadosh, and it means set apart or different or not common. The reason that Israel was given the kosher food laws was to set them apart from all the other nations, to mark them as set aside for Yahweh. They weren't forbidden from eating those foods for reasons of nutrition or dietary cleanliness. It was a matter of holiness.
A major tenet of Torahism, which you may know as the Hebrew Roots Movement or Torah-observant Christianity, is that the kosher food laws are required of all followers of Jesus today. Our Torah-keeping friends not only believe that Christians are required to abstain from all the food prohibited in the law of Moses, but also that eating things like pork and shellfish is sinful and lawless, and I am going to share with you today yet another reason why this just is not a biblical position, and we are going to look at a common passage from a new perspective. So here, Professor Solberg is saying the Bible does not teach on clean food, that we can eat anything. Is that the truth? He continues to say, as we talked about in other videos, Gentiles have never been expected to keep the kosher food laws. This is the objective of this cross-examination, the one I'm making. Then he continues to say, the Torah shows us in no uncertain terms that under the law of Moses, God had a different dietary standard for the Israelites than he did for the Gentiles. So Professor is like saying Yahweh had some laws for the Israelites on the issue of food and another set of laws for the Gentiles. Do we have that really? Now, then he goes ahead to give an example, reading this verse, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 21. It says, "You shall not eat anything that has died naturally. You may give it to a sojourner who is within your towns, that he may eat it. or you may sell it to a foreigner, for you are a people only to the Lord your God. Now, this is the verse which Professor is using to prove that Yahweh had two sets of laws for the Gentiles. You can eat unclean food. For the Israelites, you eat clean food. Because of one the reason here is because Israelites are a people only to Yahweh. They are Elohim. Question. In the first place, is this verse talking of unclean animals like pork and shellfish, which Professor is actually preaching? Is it? No. This was a clean animal which just died naturally without being slaughtered. And the reason for slaughtering is given by the same Torah. Now, then, if that is not true, so Professor in the first place is diverting scriptures. He's reading a verse which is talking about other things. Then he now brings his unclean animals so that Christians can eat. This is not talking of keep a dog, keep a pig or shellfish to a sojourner or a foreigner. No, it's talking about an animal which died, a clean animal which died naturally. Now, let's look at the parallel of this verse. Leviticus 17, verse 15. And I don't know why Professor is not reading this, because we should not actually be reading scripture selectively. It's saying, and every soul that which died of itself, or that which is torn or pierced, whether it be homeborn, who is that? Or a sojourner, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening, then shall be cleaned. So this verse actually is disapproving what Professor is saying here, that Gentiles have never been expected to keep kosher food laws. This is the same law which applies to sojourners and homeborn. Then the question is, are these verses contradicting each other? No, they are not contradicting each other. What happens here is that there were more than two groups of foreigners to the nation of Israel. One, those who accepted to join them. These one now are the one being addressed here. And then the one which Professor is capitalizing on are those who did not accept to join. And this one again is figurative. It was a picture. Those who joined the children of Israel were a picture of those Gentiles who are accepting to be part of the Commonwealth of Israel, as Apostle Paul wrote of Ephesians chapter 2, starting from verses 11. Okay, Professor continued to say, so the Israelites were not allowed to eat anything that died naturally, not even meats like beef and lamb, which were allowed under the Mosaic law. The Israelites were not allowed to eat it because it was not natural, ritually killed. Now, ritually killed, they say in the verse which says that the children of Israel also were forbidden to eat blood, and if an animal is not cut, the blood is not poured. It says in Deuteronomy 12:16 says, only ye shall not eat blood, those shall pour it out upon the earth as water. Maybe that's what the Professor is saying here by saying it was not ritually killed. Now, there's also a verse which Professor has been avoiding. He normally says in his teaching, he says the Jerusalem Council allowed the Gentiles to eat anything. But when you read Acts 15 verse 20, this is what it says. But that we write unto them, that they abstain. Abstain, what is the meaning of that? From pollutions of idols. This is meat sacrificed to idols and fornication. There was a lot of fornication relating to food in the Gentiles. And from what is strangled, which was not now, where the blood is not poured, and from blood. So you can see we are not free to eat anything. Unlike what Professor Anoma is reading, Romans 14 verses 2, he say we are free to eat anything. Anything there was a dispute, herbs or herbs and meat. Then Professor continues to say, however, they were free to keep or sell that animal to the Gentiles, that the sojourners and the foreigners who could eat it. Then he continues to say, though the Gentiles were allowed to eat food that was considered unclean for the Israelites, and why this distinction in verse 21? And then he say, for you are a people only to the Lord your God. But what about this one now? The home porn. These are laws which concerning food, which is now even the sojourners are expected to follow. Then it continues to say, the word holy in Hebrew is kodesh, and it means set apart or different or not common. The reason that Israel was given the kosher food laws was to set them apart from all the other nations, to make them set aside for Yahweh. They were not forbidden from eating this food for reasons of nutrition or dietary cleanness. It was a matter of holiness. So it is clear from there that Professor is not reading verses conclusively. Now, there is enough evidence that those foreigners who enjoined the children of Israel were to follow the same laws. You will find it, like, for example, in Leviticus 24 verse 16, on the issue of blasphemy, they were to follow the same law. On the issue of murder, that is breaking commandment number 6, when you check Leviticus 24:22, they were to follow the same law. Now, Exodus 12, verse 14, 48, and 49, on Passover issue, those foreigners who wanted to partake the Passover were to follow the same law. Numbers 15, verse 13 to 16, on the issue of offerings and assembly, the Gentiles who enjoined the children of Israel was to follow the same law. On the aspect of love, they were to follow the same law here, Leviticus 19, verse 33 to 34. Now then we are also seeing on dietary law here, as an example, Leviticus 17:15, they were to follow the same law. Conclusions. This means Professor Harel Solberg's teaching that Gentiles have never been expected to keep the kosher food laws is not honest, since it is based on selective use of scriptures. It's my request that Professor stops misleading the world. I am also requesting him to stop attacking what he refers to as Hebrew roots Christians. And those of you who are his followers should kindly request him to teach the truth, because this is a professor who knows the Bible better than us. But the way he's doing it is misleading. I'm sorry to say that. Thank you so much.